You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 23. Today I'll be talking to Allison Sommers. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. If this is your first time listening, Art Affairs is meant to give you a look at and into the new contemporary art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, shining a spotlight on the human side of the wonderful work they do. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, and you can check out new episodes on all your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, if you like what I'm doing here, be sure to subscribe. And you can always connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Allison Sommers. Like Matt Eaton a couple episodes ago, Allison is another person who was suggested by a previous guest. She was one of the thousands of people that Alex Cuno mentioned that he'd like to see come on the show, all the way back in episode 5. Which, to be honest, I can't believe that I'm saying all the way back in episode 5. It's bizarre to me that this is already 20-something episodes in. But anyway, we'll set that aside. But it's evidence that I actually do take that question seriously. And in a lot of ways, Allison's work hits me in the same places that much of Alex's work does. But like Alex, her work has evolved quite a lot over the years. We talk about this shift from figurative work to more abstract on the show. We also discuss her recent move to Berlin, her upcoming show at Talon Gallery, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Allison Sommers. Allison, welcome to the show. It's really good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and shout out to Alex Cuno, actually, for recommending you. I think it was his episode that first suggested having you on.
I was very flattered to be recommended, for sure.
So let's dive into your background for a bit. From what I understand, you grew up in a military family. Were both of your parents in the armed forces?
No, my mom was a homemaker, as I guess we called them in the day. I don't know what we're supposed to say anymore. But yeah, so my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and Dad was in the Air Force.
Okay, what did he do for the Air Force?
He was a navigator, so he was the map guy that sat in, the not front cockpit.
The perception for military families is that they move around a lot. So was that your situation as well? Did you guys move around? Absolutely.
I was always kind of bummed that my parents decided to keep us in the lower 48, so I don't have any extremely cool stories of being abroad when my dad was still in the service. But every 3 to 4 years we moved somewhere. I am the only issue of my parents' marriage, so I was very much only child, it lent itself to an interiority. I guess I've always been kind of the person that would be doing that in the first place. Like I've always very much been on my own, doing my own thing. But with no siblings and with moving around a lot, you get very used to kind of making your own world and your own fun and being much less dependent on your, exterior circumstances to root yourself in a certain way.
Did you guys eventually settle down at some point? Like, was there a point where there was an eventual consistency?
Well, in a certain, I guess we rooted ourselves when my folks split up, so we didn't move it around anymore after that. But yeah, we ended up staying in Maryland. My dad was, stationed in DC, and so we were in Southern Maryland, and that's when the parents split and went separate ways. But then I stayed in Maryland until college.
Okay, and did you have any exposure to like the arts as a kid? Is it something that you had much around you?
In a sense of it being, so I come from a upper middle class family that has a lot of really conventional expectations about what it means to be a proper person and a proper citizen. So I think there's always been a lot of exposure to music and to film and that sort of thing. My exposure to unconventional arts came much later. And it's something that I've always, I guess, been a little self-conscious about. I feel like I had a very conventional taste in art for a really long time. As a kid, I was really, obsessed by Mucha and Michelangelo and, I don't know, Rococo, the sort of stuff that when you are trying to be a cultured young citizen, the stuff you think you're supposed to be interested in.
Right.
I'm a 9-year-old that listens to classical music, like pretentious little shit.
Well, and from what I understand, you've been drawing and painting since you were like a kid as well. So how did that all first start for you? Like, what got you interested in it?
I honestly, it's impossible to say what the beginning point there was. I've always had completely itchy drawing fingers. My parents were always really, I was never discouraged from it. I don't think that when they saw their really young child drawing, they were worried that it was going to turn into this, obstacle in front of me becoming a lawyer or whatever the hell I was supposed to do with my life. But yeah, I mean, they were always really, really encouraging. I always had, art supplies. It wasn't just like, have these crappy crayons and deal with it. Like, I feel like I remember having nice sets of, paint and whatever. I don't know. Like, it was my thing.
Did that change at some point where they realized you actually wanted to make a career of it?
Well, when your daughter is threatening to apply to art school instead of getting a conventional degree, yeah, that the tone got a little. Yeah, I mean, one of my parents was, "Do what you want." The other one was, "No, you're going to get an actual degree." And I think the joke goes that some of the expectation was that I was going to get a BA and also my MRS degree.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a conventional family in a lot of ways.
So when you went to college, though, you did end up going for a non-art degree, right? You graduated in a history degree from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. So why did you end up going to Virginia? If you were in Maryland at that point, what led you to Virginia?
Honestly, the quickest answer is that I was so mad that I didn't get to go to art school that I took the first recommendation of my family. UVA is a family school. And I would also point out that I was 17 when I went to college. Like, the way that school had gone, like, I was on the early end. And so after having lost the fight about art school, I was like, well, fine, fuck you, I will go to UVA then. And so I did.
Well, and then why did you end up going I mean, obviously, it sounds like there was this battle and you lost it for art school, but why history? What led you into history?
Honestly, it would have been either history or literature. And at the time, the latter part of high school, I mean, history is an absolute obsession of mine. This wasn't a long leap for me to be doing, I wish that I could have done 8 degrees, put it that way. So, it wasn't like they were, shipping me off from the military or something like that. I still got to go to, I mean, at the time, I don't know what it is now, but at the time UVA we were always neck and neck with Berkeley for the #1 public school in the country. So, like, it was an excellent education. I had a great time. So it wasn't like I was losing out.
What were you hoping to do, like, with the history degree? Like, what was the goal after college?
Oh, Lord, there was no goal. My life has just been a series of, like, just trying to find the next milestone, like, on the pathway in front of me. I haven't had a large, I mean, I guess I wish that I had gotten further in the education, but I have no good reason to have done so. Like, I would love to go back to school and buy books and write papers and whatever, but I don't have a really good reason to, so.
And after graduating, you ended up staying in Charlottesville for a while. Why did you stay there? Did that just become home because you've been there for so long?
Well, the aforementioned relative goallessness is kind of a bit of a theme in my life. I didn't have a better excuse, like, I didn't have a good excuse to leave. And I also, during college, I started interning for one of the weekly newspapers in Charlottesville, called The Hook, which is sadly no longer in existence because it's print media, and we know that story. And by the time that I was graduating, I got a full-time position as a graphic designer. And then within, let's say 2 years, I was the art director there. So I was working in a real capital L real life job. So I didn't have a good reason to leave.
Yeah. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, that's like 2 years you moved from intern to art director. Like, tell me about that. How did that happen?
Well, let's say I was an intern by second year. And then when I graduated, then I was like full-time hired. And then I was art director just because there was staff turnover and, I was the last man standing. So,
well, I mean, you won an award for that, right? Didn't you? You won an award from the Virginia Press Association. Like, so you were doing good work, right?
I'm really, really proud of the work that we did. I had a small team and we worked like hell. I got a couple of VPNs over the years that I was art director. And it was a great shop. And honestly, a lot of the people that were working at the paper are still in media in Charlottesville and the surrounding area now. I guess this has to come up when you mention Charlottesville, but obviously we remember Charlottesville for different reasons recently. And during the mess of Unite the Right, I would hear on national NPR, my editor was then working, I guess, for one of the NPR affiliates in Virginia. And so it was just so strange to be in New York and like hear his voice on the radio and just be like, oh God, it's just really weird. But yeah.
So while you were working, the work at the Hook, or your job at the Hook, you were also making your own art at the same time. So how did you make time for both?
I didn't take care of myself. I didn't sleep a lot. I mean, I guess I would come home at, normal end of work time, make some dinner, and then spend, be up until 1 or 2, and then turn around and do it again in the morning.
Just working long hours.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, but, I was early 20s then, so it feels, thinking of it now, it just makes me really tired. But.
And without any like formal art education, how did you go about learning to paint? Is it something you just kind of figured out on your own through experimentation?
I mean, I did art classes in high school like many people do, and it was just a matter of repetition and banging my head on the door until it opened a little crack. I mean, learning how to be an artist is different than learning to paint. I think learning to paint is largely a repetition sort of thing. Baldessari says talent is cheap, so.
Are there aspects of what you perceive a formal art education to be that you feel like you missed out on because you didn't get that you wish you had?
It's funny. I've expressed a lot of regret over the years to friends who did go to art school that I hadn't. And, because I would say, I've never been in a major crit, and you just get exposed to all this different atmosphere than you would, and my takeaway from what they have to say is that your mileage will really vary dependent upon where you go. I honestly, a lot of my friends that went to art school seem to have come out with kind of negative opinions of how it went for them. There were a couple, how do I say this? I think it's the rigorousness of the art schools isn't necessarily advertised, and it seems like a lot of them were disappointed when they went, and it seemed to be, some of them are clearinghouses for rich kids who have nothing better to do, and some of them are extremely rigorous, and you get attached to some of the most hardworking, intelligent painters and, art makers in the world. And I think unless you do really intense research for college, apparently it really varies what you get. And so I don't know. And I feel like it's taken me a really long time to kind of get both of my feet on the ground. And I think I still have some lingering feelings about having been a self-taught rather than, I guess you don't say an academic artist, you know what I mean? Someone who went to art school.
For sure. No. And so while you were making art in the evening, while you were working your day job, did you do that with the intention to eventually become a professional artist? Like was that what your goal was? I mean, I guess we talked about goals, but was that the thought that eventually you're going to go into becoming an artist, or were you just doing it and that's just what it turned out to be?
There's really not a bright line for me as to what artist is and is not. And I think it's just very much part of my interaction with my world, that it's something that I've always been doing. And I was completely blindsided by turning it into something larger than me just screwing around at night. But then again, I don't know. I mean, I was just kind of doing it, honestly. And let me know if I'm a professional. The hell do I know? Like, I'm just doing it for more hours of my day now.
Well, I mean, at some point you got noticed by galleries. You started having shows.
Yeah.
When did you first, start building those relationships and making those connections?
So this is back in ye olde days of Flickr, is where we were all putting our work up. And if I remember correctly, Juxtapose noticed something on Flickr, and then Andrew Hosner from ThinkSpace clearly was reading Juxtapose online, and he had me in a really small feature wall at the old gallery in 07, I think, is the first. And so I feel like, in my memory, he emailed me, and then 2 weeks later I had sent him work. So I really just haven't had a lot of time ever since then to think about what the hell this trajectory is.
Well, and I've taken a look at some of those early shows, and I think you had one in 2008 and several just kind of back to back after that.
Yeah.
That really early work looked quite a bit different than what you're making today, which seemed to focus more on like these long-necked creatures living in these self-contained worlds. Tell me a bit about that period of your career. What was your main focus at that point? It had a very like Hieronymus Bosch vibe, which I'm sure you got a lot.
Yeah, and that's certainly, again, I would, I guess now looking back, like the fact that I was coming off of a, medieval history focused degree is a little bit more obvious in the earlier work. I don't know. The early work, I was really just kind of feeling around, reacquainting myself with gouache, which I had learned in high school but didn't use in college. And I think at the time I really was trying to do work that just pleased me. It was just kind of like, fuck it, I'm doing it work. And I still love the work, even though it's not something that I'm doing right now. Just very much losing myself inside the detail universe of those pieces. It was very much escapism, or like, I think I used to say it was like playing dollhouse a little bit, where you just kind of get nose down and do these really teeny tiny detailed pieces.
Was there some element of narration or storytelling with those earlier works?
I have always been a little sour on narration, and those pieces were supposed to be a little bit more of a wink in terms of seeming like they were narrative, but very much not necessarily being so. I think I spent a little bit too much time putting red herrings and like tricks out to be like, ooh, it's so not narrative, or like you think it is, but you're wrong. And so this like narration and really hard and fast storytelling has never been a huge part of it, even though it very much looks like it used to be.
At what point did you get the confidence, I guess, to move into full-time artist and give up the day job work?
Well, I quit the Hook in, I guess, 2010 when we moved to New York. And for a couple of years after that, I worked as a dog walker, which is very much like probably the number one, oh shit, I need a day job for artists in Brooklyn. And I went full time when I was doing, doing well financially as a painter is kind of a lie. But, I was doing well enough with my work to where we could make a 2-person household. And I also, dog walking was really, really hard on my body, and I fucked my feet up, and I basically couldn't do it anymore. So I was like, well, I can't walk, 6 hours a day in the blistering 90-degree sun. I guess I'm full-time art now. Ooh.
So what led to your move to New York? What brought you to Brooklyn?
We wanted to. I mean, it's New York, I mean, my husband is from Germany, and he has similarly rooted and romantic ideas of what New York could be. And, we really loved Charlottesville, but it is not a big place, and it's not a very, it's, we were young enough, and so we just said, fuck it, let's run, and we moved. So that's why we were there.
Did you like living in New York? I mean, it is
Absolutely.
it is a rather big change in pace, from Virginia.
I was just hungry. No, I still could just take huge bites out of New York. I absolutely love that city. It was obviously, I'm speaking now from Berlin. We're not there now. But no, New York is, I mean, it's fucking New York, dude. Like, it doesn't get better than that,
Right on, right on. So let's dive a bit more into your specific art style and some of the work that you've made over the years, which, like we talked about earlier, has changed quite a bit. But it didn't change overnight. And having spent the last week kind of going from show to show to show, looking at all of your work kind of collected at once, there is a very clear path. It seemed to evolve kind of slowly over time, almost like it became more of an abstraction of itself as time kept going on. So help me understand that evolution. I guess what drove that journey that your work took over the years?
The evolution of my work has definitely been slow because it's been a combination of frustration, because I think that the art process generally is one of frustration. I don't, people for whom it comes easy, I'm suspicious of. And then also, honestly, it's been a pathway of increasing art literacy, I guess, referring back to having a more conventional exposure. Honestly, the longer I lived in New York, the more I started traveling. I was exposed to a lot of work that looked then, and certainly still looks now, nothing like what my work looks like, and just getting really, really obsessed with, with anything from, German Expressionism to the Fluxus movement, just some of the more conceptual underpinnings of the later 20th century art really, really started appealing to me. And so it's been kind of a struggle dragging what was kind of almost illustrative looking work, which certainly was true to myself, and dragging my pathway forward with that without losing the thread of the work that I myself was making. It's been, I don't know, when you start getting obsessed with Beuys or something, and then you're still painting figures, it just, sometimes there's a lot of, frustration with the gap between your taste and your actual output.
Okay.
So, but the entire thing is supposed to be, it's a lifelong struggle against yourself in a certain way. So not supposed to be, but it sure as shit has ended up like that for me.
Well, and a lot of people, I'm sure. So, your work does have a heavy focus on, I guess we'll call it the meaty bits, intestines, organs, stuff like that. Do you research the medical side of your work at all? Or are these the imaginings of what you feel that probably looks like? So
I have always been really attracted to the meaty bits. They're just something that fascinates me. Again, when I was growing up in Maryland as a kid, like, we were right on the Chesapeake Bay, which means there's a lot of, poking at dead fish with sticks in my childhood. And just generally being fascinated by that stuff without necessarily it having a death bent. So I actually, the real short answer to this question is I am fascinated with the stuff in the first place, but I also am, I work hard to not work too closely to sources. So I might do painting studies of textures or of the appearance of meat or something like that. But it's really important to me that I'm not working too closely with anything quote unquote real. I want there to be some digestion process going on, which now that I have said it out loud means that in my metaphor, my work is shit. So make of that what you will.
And another aspect of your work that's changed over the years is your color palette. I noticed a very distinct kind of shift in your color palette. It almost became less saturated, a little bit more muted, pale. Was that an intentional shift, or was it sort of organic as your interest also shifted?
It's probably both. In the years where my work has gotten more muted, it's because I've been going through a period of fighting with my work. And whenever I feel like I need to kind of pull back and focus on something that isn't, because color is very distracting. And so I'll pull back to doing grisaille for a few months. And so it takes a while for the color to come back in. So I was probably, sometimes I just spend time focusing on other aspects of the painting.
How do you see your style evolving from here? Like, are you wanting to continue to evolve like you have in the past?
Oh God, no. Yeah. How boring to not change. I mean, truly, like, just shoot me. I think one of the projects that I'm working on right now is I've been doing some installation work and some more kind of found object and collage work that involves a lot of gesso and a lot of, honestly, just sticking garbage together to see what works. And I feel like I have this sort of stuff that I've been doing for a few years on the one hand, and then the painting and the drawing that I've been doing for, I guess, 15 years or whatever now. And I'm really trying to like bang these two like Barbies together and see where they actually meet in the middle. I really want to find a pathway through both of these things at once. I've had a few breakthroughs recently just because this this pandemic year has us looking at everything sideways, I guess, and I've been in the studio a lot, but I don't know. I mean, it's a slow process. I'm trying not to be too impatient with myself, because if you speed up too much, just the work gets a little hinky, and it's not, I don't know, it doesn't feel as satisfying, I guess.
And so what I found interesting about those found object assemblages that you mentioned, because that is something you've been doing quite a bit more recently, is they definitely look like they're of a certain time period. Do you feel that it's your interest in history that you mentioned earlier, your passion in history, do you think that all comes from the same place, and your interest in working in these found objects is sort of coming from the same spirit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess this is completely uninteresting for the podcast listeners, but you can kind of see the accumulation of shit that my living room is too. I mean, I just personally, I have a lot of interest in the textures and the overlay of, I don't know, layers of grime sounds so dumb, but the accumulation of time as a medium itself as it acts on objects. And a lot of the installation and assemblage work that I've been doing kind of hinges from this impulse that I have to save orphaned things. You know, when if you go to a junk shop or you're walking on the street and you just see something that's interesting, I don't know, I'm always filling my pockets up with stuff. You know, I'm like a crow. I don't know. And just having these objects that are themselves like a palimpsest of the people that have had them and of the time that has gone over them, and recontextualizing them as art pieces. First of all, I find extremely interesting. Second of all, it makes it seem like I'm not losing my goddamn mind and filling my apartment with trash, because it's not trash, it's art supplies. Excuse me. So it's kind of like, a self-saving thing. That being said, the boxes and boxes of garbage that I paid to put on a container to ship to Germany is just a little staggering.
That's amazing. Are you able to do as much of that in Berlin as you may have been able to do in New York?
I'm still kind of finding the way through that. New York is a very dirty city, and Berlin is dirty too. It's the trash picking is, so far as I've found, is not quite as delicious as it is in New York. But whatever. There's a lot of urbex stuff that you can still do here, just because the city is still kind of learning how to take care of itself after the fall of the wall, and just generally not really being a very wealthy place. But there isn't my trash beach here in Berlin so far as I've found it yet.
Have you found that evolving your style as much as you have over the years, and continue to do, like, difficult in some way, in the sense that, like, your collectors have established certain expectations on what they perceive your work to be, and galleries as well, right? So have you ever felt pressure to stay with a certain aesthetic just to satisfy those expectations that people have put on you?
It is financially unhelpful. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone who's working as an artist, even if you're not doing it full time, understands what having financial pressure looks like. And even if we're not even attaching the financial aspect of selling your work to it, having your work experienced by somebody that is not you, and therefore having an implied audience, fundamentally changes the work no matter how hard you work at it not doing that. And so this has definitely been something that I've been very conscious over the years with, and I find extremely frustrating. And I think that most artists that I've talked to seem to have to work quite intentionally to make sure that that doesn't creep too far into the work. I think it's really important to acknowledge that even being able to worry about that is absolutely a position of privilege, you know. The fact that I can actually take the majority of my time and be dicking around doing work that I want to be instead of work that really needs to be sold and therefore has to have different considerations attached to it is just absolutely me being extremely lucky. And I mean, you know, you always have to do pay the piper work, but this year's been pretty challenging, I think. I mean, at least one of my galleries has shut down. The postal system has been shot in the face. Like the concept of selling work right now has just been very complicated. So, yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I'm just currently just working to make sure that I'm still working and keeping my head above water, because it's been a stressful year. But,
right.
Yeah.
That's putting it lightly. So let's talk about some of the mediums that you work in. You mentioned gouache being your primary focus as far as your paintings go. What do you like about gouache as a medium?
Oh, I just think it's delicious. It's candy colored in real life. It works a little bit more like oils than it does watercolors, even though obviously it's basically just a different kind of watercolor. It's really a fiddly asshole. It's not an easy paint to use, but I was lucky in that when I was learning how to paint, my teachers had already given me gouache, so I was like, I did not separate the difficulty of the paint itself from the difficulty of learning to paint. So by the time that somebody told me that gouache was hard to work with, I was like, oh, sure, okay.
I just thought that was paint.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, thank God I had this youthful optimism that I was willing to bang my head on the door with this. It's just, I don't know, it's a sexy paint to use. And right now I'm trying to push the limits of it because I could definitely feel that I really want to return to doing some oil painting. But I just am not set up with it right now. So I have to kind of sock away some money so I can get myself back into that place. But it's kind of fun, like, after having gotten to a certain level of comfort with gouache, like, kind of just seeing what else it can do. But being married to paper as a painting surface, which I love, does mean that there's a problematic in terms of, well, if you want to do a big piece, you're going to be spending money in framing it. And I don't know, I would like to be working with something that doesn't, like, that you can just kind of gesso something and just go, you know, like I want to paint on all sorts of different stuff. And right now it's like, well, you know, it's still watercolor.
When you're working on a piece, what do you, I guess, what usually goes into the initial concept? How do you work out the initial idea? Are you sketching in sketchbooks? Are you kind of drawing things out? Like, how does that usually come to you?
It's 100% of everything is the sketchbooks. I definitely think of my life's work as actually the sketchbooks. 'Cause they're also the one thing that I keep. Like, I'll never sell out of them. I fill like a full sketchbook about once every month and a half.
Wow.
It's like, it's hours daily of practice. You know, 'cause it's the place, because it's only for me, it's the place where I feel like I'm drawing without having somebody looking over my shoulder. It's the place where I'm keeping my chops up. It's the place where if I fuck up, it doesn't matter because it's your sketchbook. Who cares? You know, you can be a little bit more experimental. You can push a little harder, and then it comes with you everywhere, right? So it can be this constant companion of your studio with you. And so the paintings tend to be almost kind of just toss-offs of like, ooh, I got a good idea that I've been chewing on in my sketchbook, or I get obsessed with one shape or one whatever figure, who knows. And so I'll kind of dance around that bush for a while on my sketchbook and then settle on one, whatever it is that I'm doing in the painting, and then go ahead with it. Over the years, I've kind of had a push and pull with how much planning I'm doing for the paintings. And I'm very much in a period where I'm extremely suspicious of doing too much pre-planning on for the painting itself, because I think you end up, I don't know, when you're putting the line work down, like for the painting itself, if you've been really doing well in the sketchbook, then you're looking back at the sketchbook drawings rather than looking at what you're putting on the painting, and you lose a little bit of the meat on the bones of what the ideas were, you know. So I try to kind of have some things a little unresolved when I get to the point of doing the paintings. But then, you know, it means not every painting's a winner, but, you know, it is what Another reason I'd like to get into oil or get back into oils is because obviously you can only change so much of what goes down on the paper with gouache. There's only so much overpainting that you can do, and you can't sand it off when you're angry at it. So
So from the sketchbooks, like what's the next step? Are you sketching things out onto the paper before you start painting?
Yeah, I'll give myself at least, it depends on, honestly, it depends on how seriously I'm taking the piece and how quickly I need it done. If it's something that needs to go out for a deadline or something like that, I'm going to give myself some pretty robust lines, like on the paper, like it's going to be pretty well sketched out. But I'm trying to move away from that because, again, I want to see how, I want to see the dynamism of the paint process as well. I think when my paintings interest me the least, it's when I've gotten the line work down, and the line work is where all the sexy fun has happened. And then the painting kind of falls into this, like, coloring book, right? Like, that's just not as exciting. So I'm kind of trying to find where I can find the dynamism in the paint itself. And if it seems like my lines are getting, the painting is getting a little bit more loose in that sort of way, it's because I've been working really, really hard on trying to, stay outside of the lines. Like, not just have it be this, like, paint by number thing.
Right. Now that makes a lot of sense. And then for the assemblage pieces, how do those usually come together? Do you usually start with the painting portion of that, or do you have objects that you think go together? Like, how does that usually materialize?
So I aforementioned as a crow, I just basically have I have just boxes of crap. And if I'm, let's say that if I'm feeling like doing assemblage, then I'll pull out some pieces that are just speaking to me, and then I'll pull out smaller pieces that might go in those, and I'll just keep 5 to 10 of them open at any one time, and just, sometimes you can't work on them for a couple of weeks because your brain isn't there, or sometimes you'll pass by and be like, just glue 4 things together and then the pathway follows. And then that's when I kind of pull it back and I'm like, this could take a painting would look terrible here, make decisions about it. But the assemblage stuff is very much a gut level, sort of, I don't know, they're found objects. You can't really do that much planning with them.
But then the painting portion, I guess, does that come from the objects that you've compiled, or did you already have an idea for the painting before the objects? I
have an idea of what universe of painting that I want in them for the most part. But the individual ones, it's very much like it does tend to be kind of a shooting at the hip sort of thing.
Okay, interesting. And then for the installations, the larger kind of combination of these things that you've done, and I know you've done at least 1 or 2 with Inkspace. You've done several of them over the years. How does that usually work? Is that something that you come to the gallery with and say, "Hey, I'd like to do this for my show," or is it something y'all come up with together? What's the? So gallery installations I've done with Inkspace and with Antler in Portland, and those have definitely been things that I felt were akin to the work that I was exhibiting, or actually in the last installation that I did at Antler, it was just, I think, an installation in the back room. There wasn't a painted aspect to it. Installation is something that, if I thought that I was coming to painting with a lot to learn, installation is definitely one of those things, and I'm still very much like working on schooling myself as to the history of it and the different artists that have been working in the medium. It is a very feeling around in the dark sort of thing. But I've learned a great deal about what I've been saying in my work all along by doing installations. The biggest ones that I've actually done I've done 2 different installations at the Governor's Island Art Fair. It's now called Portal Art Fair on Governor's Island in New York with the arts organization Four Heads. And both of those were larger, full room installations. The most recent one I did, I guess, was 2012. And the only 2D aspect of that was I did a series of cyanotypes on fabric, which were, the cyanotypes were of objects of assemblages that I had made, which were these, they were like bad first aid kits, basically. They were first aid kits that would be extremely unhelpful in emergencies. Like just trying to follow a thread through the work to see like, how many times I can beat the horse, basically. Do you think a lot about the conditions under which people view your work? Like, is setting the mood, the atmosphere, something that you put a lot of thought and effort into when you're preparing for a gallery show?
I have only learned about that because of doing installation. I think doing paintings for me remains something that's very much between me and that painting in the studio. And when it gets taken to a gallery context, it already changes because a gallery is a a gallery has a prescribed set of rules of expectation of what is happening. These are art pieces. They are on the wall. They're most likely for sale. They were made somewhere else and brought here. They've probably been framed. You know, they're in a certain sense, when you're moving the artwork from the studio to the gallery, there's a level of castration already going on in terms of the activity of the painting itself. Installation work, and especially doing the installation work with foreheads again, during the fair, you basically have the option of staying in your installation for the 5 weekends when the people come by to look at it, and having, watching people look at your work and watching, listening to the conversations that people have about it and with you. Whereas most of the larger shows that I've been done have been in cities where I don't live, so I don't sit in the gallery for an entire month and listen to what people have to say about the work. Probably, okay with me, especially with painting, need to protect my little heart. But with installation, there's a really interesting, a decentering of a point of view too, right? Like a painting has a certain set of, most painting that isn't trying to break the concept of painting, you walk up to it, there's a point of view that's intended, right? That's that certain point of view. I mean, you can go back through art history and talk about the very, white male colonialist point of view that was expected of a lot of painting through, vast swaths of art history. And so there is actually there can be something post-colonial and feminist actually about installation art in that sort of way, because there should be often a myriad of ways that you can see any one installation, just because there's literally not a single way to see an installation. And you think about that when you're trying to take pictures and you're just like, it's a 3D room that you're supposed to walk through. There's no one actual centered point of view for this. And I think that makes it really interesting, because it means that the person who is walking through it may feel more agency about their own explication of the artwork going on in front of them. Whereas I think there's a lot of, I think that painting can be viewed with suspicion by a vast majority, maybe not a majority, but large swath of culture are suspicious of painting in art museums, because they've been told that there's a, singular way in which to understand these things. I mean, going back to this whole concept of narrative and whatever, I've always been kind of suspicious of that, because, the author is dead. So it's always important to me that there are just a lot of different interpretations of going on. I've got my own. That's fine. I'm the one that made it, but I don't think of my own experience of my work as the, definitive way of seeing it. And installation, it's just palpably clear, because it's just a literal, decentered thing.
So is that something that, it sounds like this is a very kind of exciting, new aspect to your work. Is it something you want to continue to do and continue to build on more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, starting to do installation work just completely broke my painting. And I think I'm still kind of struggling to figure out, thank God it's something that I enjoy doing, because if it was something that I was just doing as an academic exercise, I would have stopped a long while ago. But, I had a lot of big ideas for, doing an installation this year, and, installation art might be put out of business for a little while right now. That's actually not true. There have actually been a couple of installations going on here in Berlin, but, you have to be social distancing. You have to be wearing masks. There is a element of, I guess it can be looked at as an interesting artistic problem. But it can also be looked at as sucking the fun out of some of it. So.
No doubt. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your move to Berlin. So you've mentioned it a few times. You after spending a decade in New York, you moved to Berlin last year. Yep. What prompted the move to Germany? So, I'm going to start all of this by saying that I love New York, and I will always look at myself as a New Yorker as long as they'll have me. And it also feels like a really poor year to speak poorly of New York, because it's been a real rough time there. But we did move to Berlin. We were both moving to Berlin and away from New York. There's been, and the story of gentrification and culture death is not singular to New York by any stretch of the imagination, but it's been a really palpable one, living in North Brooklyn and watching how the city has changed. But that being said, and it is happening in Berlin too, for sure. But I guess I've
spent my life moving, and every place that you move to, it's like 10 years ago, it was fucking great here. Now it sucks. So it's just like, yeah, you know, this happens everywhere. Everyone's complaining about how cool it used to be and no longer is. But, moving to Berlin, first of all, it's a matter of, I love Germany. It's been a place, I've been a potential expat my whole life, and I just managed to pull the trigger and really do it this time. I love Berlin. It's a really, really strange place. I like the arts outlook here. There's still a lot of DIY stuff going on. And it's been a real quality of life move to not, you know, for the obvious reasons of moving to a European country with, you know, social health care and dealing a little differently with the virus and all of that. Berlin itself is also, I have a really hard time of putting this to make it sound excellent, but it's lazy in this really excellent way. There's a lot of leisure and loafing going on in this city that is such a welcome change from New York. And there's a lot of the leisure time that you do spend here would like just literally be illegal in most of the country. Cause I mean, there's most parts of the United States you can't drink outside, sure, but like also clubs are open for like 4 days a week, like just open, right? So like if you really wanted to just lose yourself, you can go to a club on Saturday night and, you know, come out wiping your eyes Monday afternoon, like the fuck just happened to me, you know? So there's just like, yeah, I mean, it's fun here. I mean, obviously I didn't just move to Berlin to party, but I didn't not move to Berlin to party too. So.
Do you feel like you've settled in? I mean, it's been a year now, I guess. Does it feel like home to you?
I really hate throwing COVID in the mix of this constantly, but it's like, so we moved in September, which meant that we had a couple of good months of hanging out and meeting new people. And then all of a sudden, no one's hanging out or meeting new people anymore. So it's I'm just going to take a mulligan this year and we'll start over next year. But I've actually been really lucky. The people in Berlin are extremely welcoming. Not least because it's just like this weird expat island of just people who have run screaming from wherever they've come to because this was the place to be and that was not the place to be. So everyone's really been very supportive. I have a studio with a couple other people, and I don't know, despite everything, I've been meeting a lot of friends, and I feel as settled as you can be when you're wearing masks in the supermarket, and you know, like it's only so much you can do.
Do you know German at all? Or I mean, do you even need to know German in Berlin?
That is the right question to ask. I know German. I'm not totally fluent. I'm working on it because I really don't want to be that guy. But honestly, my immersion has been pretty slow because, as you seem to have already figured out, you really don't. I mean, English is just kind of a lingua franca in a lot of places, a lot of the larger cities in Europe, and Berlin is absolutely no exception to that whatsoever. And it's not just because there's so many English and Americans here, but there are. But, you know, people from Spain, people from wherever, whatever, you know, I mean, they probably have more English, you know, they're probably coming with more English than they did German, so it just kind of ends up being, you know, that it's something that you're saying.
Do you think it'll be difficult being so far removed from the galleries that you traditionally show with?
Shipping's killing me. That is not a joke. I'm actively looking for anything. I mean, one of the reasons that we moved is also because I wanted to be in a different, a different milieu. Like I wanted to see what it would be like to be working here as well. One of the best and worst parts of the art market in America is that, it is sales focused, right? So people can make a living doing it. There is my experience so far and just what I've been talking to people about. There are not a lot of people buying art in Berlin, but it also means that there's not a lot of that aforementioned sales focus that might be taking you away from the weirder stuff that you want to be doing. So if you can kind of, you know, hack it and manage to live here, then it might be different. So I'm extremely grateful that I can continue to have a relationship with the galleries that I do in the United States, but I'm definitely looking to kind of be having my cake and eating it too in that sense, I guess.
I mean, it's definitely a good time to not be in the U.S., I have to say. I mean, I'm sort of envious of that. As somebody who's like studied history extensively, like you have, I'm sure you have a lot of opinions about a lot of stuff that's going on right now. I mean, do you see a way, from a historian's perspective, like what's your take on it? Do you see a way out of what we're doing right now?
That's a big question. Let me say it's been a really weird time to have done a lot of plague studies. And it's really disappointing that we have not done too differently than the 14th century. I mean, you know, a lot of the clergy managed to get out of the plague okay because they all shut themselves up. And if you extend clergy to people who can go run out to the Hamptons and not be in the hoi polloi of the city, whatever. Some of the reference to, there'd be people running around wild in the streets because they thought it was the end of the world. And there's certainly people running around wild, raving in the forests in Berlin, raving, not raving mad. End of the world. Fuck it kind of shit. I don't know. I would hesitate to bring up the larger political, quandary right now because I won't get off that soapbox for many hours. I think we've all seen the graph of the income gap like the wealth gap between low and high of the United States versus right before the French Revolution, and it kind of being let's just say the old adage about history tending to rhyme is disappointingly being followed through at the moment. I am deeply, deeply pessimistic about even the best case scenario for the United States right now. And I mean, I guess, we've been out of the country almost a year, and being in a social democracy in the middle of Europe, even during these times when like there are stupid, anti-immigrant, anti-mask, anti-whatever right-wing fuckwads in Germany too. Like it's not like this is some grand utopia where regular social rules don't exist or whatever. But it's really, really strange to go a couple of days reading German news and then open the New York Times website and just be like, sorry, what are we doing today now? What is like, it's just really the longer I'm away, the more surreal it's gotten, and it's not a good kind of surreal.
No, that's terrible. Does the state of like global politics have any effect on your work? Does that bleed into your work at all?
One thing that I have never really talked a whole lot about, but I've been realizing over the past 2 or 3 years is some of this more organic, visceral stuff that I've been doing over the past couple of years apparently is part of a sort of escapist impulse on my part, specifically as regards my anxiety about global warming and about the loss of biomass and that sort of thing. And for a while I was working with the concept of some of these things being, I don't need it to be too specific or have like an actual story of what's going on there. But the thought of these things possibly being viral has always been part of like what I was doing there. But I'm kind of not leaning so hard on the virus pedal this year, let's say. I mean, they're definitely, they started from a fascination with, the natural and the organic and parts of bodies or parts of invertebrate creatures, but it's also very much part of cutting humans out of the equation in a certain way. But that's definitely still something cooking.
Well, that's certainly hitting close to home in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess this is going to be like the least timeless interview because I don't think you could probably like figure out what day we even, or at least what week we're recording it in.
So is Germany home for you now? You think you'll stay?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be really, really stressful to contemplate moving back to the United States. I mean, and it's not even a matter of the current political situation, but it's also just a matter of it's just very comfortable. I'm really having a nice time here. I could never afford a studio outside of my house in Brooklyn, and I have one now. The cost of living is much cheaper. And you're also, this year I haven't really been able to exercise this very much, but you're a train ride away from many of the world's premier capitals. I mean, for relatively little money, I can just, dick around Europe. Who gets to do that? I mean, it's an astonishing luxury. And, the art museums, the arts funding that makes all of these very strange projects possible. Also, I'm going to say the opera here is better.
This episode's sponsored by Berlin, apparently.
Berlin Tourist Board. Don't come here. We don't have enough housing.
So let's talk about what you have coming up. And actually, Caitlin, just a couple episodes ago, broke the news that you guys are having a 2-person show in December at Talon Gallery. Yeah,
damn her. She stole my thunder. I don't get to announce anything. No, I'm super excited about it. I'm less excited about the fact that as the year goes on, it looks less to be an in-person show. Because some of the installation things that I was thinking about doing are not something that I'm going to ask somebody else to set up. I don't know. It's so uncertain right now what the second wave in either of our countries is going to look like. So I have no idea, but I'm really excited about the show. The few times that we've talked about it, I get the feeling that we're both kind of dancing around being too specific about a lot of the work that we're doing because we kind of want it, we want it to be interesting and not be overlapping too much. Cause I know that there's a lot of things that we do deal with in terms of, she said something about some of these works being dealing with, the rhizosphere and these chunks of the world with all of the critters and bacteria and whatever in it and that interconnectivity of it. And, and that's definitely something that I can see going on in my work as well.
So have you established a theme for the show at all as far as your body of work goes?
I know what I'm doing, and I think I know what she's doing too. We haven't gone so far as to name anything or, I think as far as, well, sure as shit with my work, I need another month or so in the studio to kind of cook on this to make sure that I've got, the solid boundaries. Cause right now, if I flip through the book where I keep all of my ideas for, installations and larger shows and stuff, there's just too many pages in this section right now. I know that I need to do some editing in terms of how many things I'm trying to bring to the table. So I need to chew for another month or so before I think it will be appropriate to be I don't want to be overwhelming, be I'm trying to do this and then also this thing. And would you like flashing lights? Possibly a popcorn machine? I don't know.
So have you been anticipating doing an installation for this one, despite the fact that you're now in Germany and also COVID times?
Okay. So yeah, it's the COVID times, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, if I go in person, then yeah, I would do it, but it's, I don't know. Well, I'm the TBD. I had ideas about an installation because even if I was just coming from Germany before we knew there was a pandemic, it was damn, flying from Berlin to Portland is going to be an enormous drag. But, I love all my people in Portland. I love the 2 galleries and Neil and Susanna. And yeah, no, I was very much looking forward to doing that. And I haven't actually seen Talon. I haven't been to Portland since they've had it. But I've seen pictures and there are these huge front windows and I was really excited about doing something in them. But watch the space. I don't know.
So anything else coming up for you besides the show in December? Has that got all of your focus?
So that's got most of my focus right now. I've really been trying to work hard on not overloading my schedule kind of last year and this year. Last year because I was making an, giant ass move, and this year because it's 2020. But also I want to work on the stuff that I'm doing for the show very specifically. And then also I'm trying to let's put it this way. Some of the ideas that I had about maybe doing some of the more installation stuff or finding where my paintings find homes in the installation is part of a larger project that I want to give a lot of oxygen to. So it's kind of I'm peeling some of these ideas off for the Talon show, but I also kind of want to give myself some breathing room in terms of if I can actually afford to do so, just maybe cask of Amontillado, bricking my shit up in the studio and then just kind of really working on it. Fortunately, I think the next couple of months are going to be a second wave of COVID. So I'm probably going to have all the time in the world to do that if I want to. Other than that, I have a show I don't have a show. I'm in a show that ThinkSpace is taking to the Lancaster, Museum of Art. They're having they have a larger show and this is a special focus on suicide prevention and awareness. And I agreed to do the show because I have a, personal family reason why it was a really important thing for me. And then I sat in my studio and stared at a blank piece of paper and said, why the fuck did I agree to do a show about suicide? Because it's just my work. I often am trying to wink and be a little funny in all of my work. And this is obviously not anything to wink about. So, I'm really excited to be included in that show. That one was definitely a long cooker for me. That took a moment to figure out how to approach without seeming like it was just a little pat or, obviously not a thing to make fun of. So.
Right. No, there's a certain amount of kind of reverence, I guess you have to approach that with.
But reverence, delicacy, right? Because I think that there's a lot of different ways of talking about suicide. And I think that, I don't know. I don't want it to be in any one direction. And I certainly don't want it to seem like it's funny to me because it's just not. So, yeah.
And on that note.
Yeah. Good. Glad. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you online?
Instagram is probably the best place to find me, and you're going to have to put that in the show notes because I still, to this day, after however many years of having Instagram, cannot remember for my life what my damn name is.
Sure. Yeah, no, that'll be in the show notes. You also have a Patreon, don't you? I do. So tell me about that. How have you liked that platform?
Patreon has been extremely helpful over the past couple of years. Let's say I've been on it for 4 or 5 years. I am so grateful to have constant supporters there because I don't think it's surprising to anyone that art is a very feast or famine kind of situation. And so having this background level of support from people who are interested in your process, are interested in, getting postcards or pieces or whatever it may be, and then just there for you. It's been a lifesaver. I do a lot of explanation of my work over there. Although I'm not terribly tech savvy, I do, some videos and GIFs and that sort of thing. I don't talk about it a lot on my Instagram because, it's just still the concept of paywalling. I still have some, I'm really grateful that I have the option of doing it. And I just, I guess I'm just queasy that I have to pay the piper. Let's just put it that way. I really wish that I had the luxury of never having to worry about money at all, but I guess that's me and every other person on the planet, so whatever. But yeah, I've been completely bowled over by the amount of support that I've gotten from people. It's been amazing.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So, and I'll also include that in the show notes. So, last question, and this is something I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh, Christ, I didn't prepare this one. I really should have, shouldn't I? I bet Gregory Jacobson would be an absolute hoot. Just my guess. And at very least, their show on WFMU was very good. I don't know if they're doing it anymore, but it's in the FMU archives. So.
All right. Very cool. Awesome. Well, Allison, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, really. Thank you for having me.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Allison. One thing I found so interesting while, researching Allison for the show was just how much her work has evolved throughout the course of her career. We talked about it quite a bit on the show, but it's something that really struck me and just how different the beginning point and now is from each other. And, if you see the beginning and end points, it's quite striking just how different they are. But if you look at that evolution, it's actually seems rather natural. And, as somebody who is creating art for an audience, for a collector base, I know that can be a difficult thing, especially when people set expectations for your work. And when your work changes, will they come along for the ride? And that's a conversation that we've actually talked about a couple times on the show so far. In my talk with Caitlin, she echoed the same sentiment, just being concerned about introducing new aspects to her work, moving into color, moving into more humorous waters, and the fear that, will my collectors come along with that evolution, and will that be financially viable? Faith 47 said very similar thing, as she wanted to move away from animal-themed work and into, tapestries and stuff like that, just very different from what people knew her as. Would her audience come along? Or maybe they won't. Maybe it's a different audience. Maybe she picks up different people and it becomes a completely different thing. But I have to imagine there's an amount of anxiety that comes with that. It doesn't appear that that's held Allison back at all. And it also could be, the gallery relationships that she's established over the years. Certainly she has a very strong relationship with ThinkSpace, with Antler, with Talon. And they certainly don't seem to shy away from the fact that her work has changed and evolved and have seemed to embrace it. So, maybe that's part of the equation here. But either way, it'll definitely be interesting to see how Allison's work changes throughout the rest of her career. And I'm excited to see what Allison and Caitlin's show looks like in December. Obviously, she's still working on it, and it's too soon to say exactly what's going to be in it, but I think the two of them have an incredible amount of synergy, and so I'm really looking forward to the show. Definitely follow the Talon Instagram, Allison's Instagram, Caitlin's Instagram to find out more information as it develops. So thanks again to Allison for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. If you happen to have Apple Podcasts, rating and reviewing the show there is actually a great way to help out. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artafairspodcast.com or on Instagram at artafairspodcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.